श्रीशैलेशदयापात्रम् धीभक्त्यादिगुणार्णवम् यतीन्द्रप्रवणम् वन्दे रम्यजामातरम् मुनिम् लक्ष्मीनाथसमारम्भाम् नाथयामुनमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्ताम् वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम् यो नित्यम् अच्युतपदाम्बुजयुग्मरुक्मव्यामोहतस्तदितराणि तृणाय मेने अस्मद्गुरोर्भगवतोऽस्य दयैकसिन्धोः रामानुजस्य चरणौ शरणम् प्रपद्ये लोकाचार्याय गुरवे कृष्णपादस्य सूनवे संसारभोगिसन्दष्टजीवजीवातवे नमः।
Asmad-Gurubhyo Namaha, Asmad-Paramagurubhyo Namaha, Asmad-Sarvagurubhyo Namaha. We like to start every session with respecting our teachers, all of our teachers. So again, we're continuing on with Tattva Trayam by Pila Lokacharya. The text which we're following, we have one text from some North Indian scholars and another text by Satyamurti Iyengar in English. There's a third text which goes into the details of Manavala Muni's commentary on this text, but it's very archaic English, so we've decided not to go into that depth with this series of discussions. But we would probably have to work on that text in order to make it easy to understand in modern English. Okay, so last time we again the Tattva Trayam speaks about three principles. The three principles are Chit, Achit, and Ishvara. So Chit means the soul. The first principle that we talk about in spiritual life is the soul. Cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. Descartes said in the West. So we all have this realization that we exist as a body, separate, as an entity, let's say, as a spiritual entity, separate from the material nature, which is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita by Lord Krishna. But the exact details of that we don't know. So the first part of Tattva Trayam is about Chit, or consciousness, or the individual soul, the individual consciousness, otherwise known as the Jivatman or Atman. The word Atman can be thrown around in Sanskrit a lot, and sometimes it means Jivatman, or the individual soul. Sometimes it means Paramatman, the supreme soul. So we'll just to make it clear, we'll say Jivatman and Paramatman. We'll make that distinction, or we'll just say the individual consciousness or individual soul. The second part of the book is about, I believe, the material nature, material elements, and the third part is about Ishvara, the Supreme Lord, the Supreme Godhead. So we're on the first part. In the first part, we've done 10 sutras already, so which is concerning the soul or Chit, the Chit principle. So let's go and have a look at the texts, and let's go through. So we have we finished with the 10th sutra. More or less, we're getting into definitions about the soul. So the 10th sutra again was immaterial, means it cannot be thought of in the same way as it is possible to think of matter. So obviously, there's a lot more that can be said about this, and we do not have as I said, we're not going into the commentary of Manavala Muni here, but we discussed, we have this English rendering by Satyamurti Iyengar in the other text of Manavala Muni's commentary, so we'll go to that later on. But anyway, let's continue on with Sutra number 11. Partless. Now, the soul is considered to be partless. So it's one thing, and it's an indivisible thing. So this we know from the Bhagavad Gita. In the second chapter, Krishna explains these things. So partless means that it cannot be broken into parts, nor is it a whole consisting of parts. So he's trying to be very clear about this here, and he's saying the soul cannot be broken into parts, neither is it a conglomeration of parts, which are unbreakable. So even if we thought the soul was made up of parts, even if we thought it couldn't be broken into parts, but still we could also have this understanding that it had different parts to it. So he's saying no here. He's saying no, it doesn't have that. So Satyamurti Iyengar, the other text deals with more than one sutra at a time. So we're going to look at the 12th sutra here, and then we'll look at the other text. Okay, so free from modification. Spiritual things are free from modification. They're eternally the same. So unlike material things like the material body, which have a source, have a birth, have a growth, have a decay over time, and ultimately are turned into dust, right? So modification over a period of time, the soul is always the same. So free from modification means that it is not a modification of matter. It is not a modification of matter. So matter can be, goes through these modifications. The soul does not. It exists uniformly in the same position forever. So it's eternal. So now with those two sutras, let's have a look at the other text. Text 11 and 12. The soul exists at all times, and that is why it is said to be eternal. To the query, why then there is birth as well as death, the answer is birth only means the association of the soul with the body. When the soul becomes associated with a particular body, and death means the disintegration of the body or disassociation of the soul with the body. Sometimes people who have had some sort of near-death experience, they refer to it as an out-of-body experience. They are out of the body, so they are disassociated from the body. It is the body that comes and goes while the soul stays on forever. And he quotes here from Bhagavad Gita 2:12, Najayate mriyate va vipastit. Okay, so let's go back to the other text. Text 13. Having the above mentioned attributes, the soul cannot be cut by weapons, burnt by fire, made wet by water, or dried by the air, or withered by the sunshine. And we have a footnote there, so let's have a look at the footnote. Footnote here quotes from Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, 24, 24th sloka. Okay. So I think that's pretty straightforward. This is very, very, basic stuff. If you read Bhagavad Gita, you should be able to already know this, right? Text 14. According to the Jain view, okay, so now we're bringing in, Philologacharya is bringing in other views. We have certain books like Sarvadarshan Sangraha by one Madhavacharya, not to be confused with Madhvacharya. Madhvacharya is a Advaitin. This Madhavacharya, who wrote Sarvadarshan Sangraha, is an Advaitin, follower of Shankara. He was probably the first person to delineate all the different schools that were extant at his time in India of philosophy. And he was, and what he did was he went through and criticized them from his point of view. His philosophy was Advaita, so he criticized them like that. Vedanta Deshika has done a similar thing with a book called Tattva Mukta Kalapa. Dr. Alwar, who teaches us Mumukshapati every Saturday, he is starting 3 times a week a class on this, on Tattva Mukta Kalapa. Unfortunately, it is in Sanskrit. So, but it'll probably be up on YouTube at some time. And, so it's something maybe if we learn Sanskrit properly, we can go and watch it. So according to the Jain view, okay, so there are these Jains. Now Jains, the Jain religion, if you don't know what Jainism is all about, the Jains have some sort of acceptance of the Vedas a little bit, but not really. And they have this strange idea that the soul is the same size and extent as the body. So an elephant has a big soul, an ant has a very small soul, because the soul is coextensive with the body. So here he explains this. According to the Jain view, the soul is considered coextensive with the body. Firstly, such a view is against Shruti. So the first objection to this view, this is very common that when we have these type of scriptures where we talk about other schools, very, very commonly, a question will come up, what about this topic or what about that topic? The first answer which is given is usually called what's called the Purva Paksha, or the first part. Paksha means a half, right? 15 days of the bright fortnight, 15 days of the dark fortnight make up a month. These are also called Pakshas. So it means a half. A Paksha is a half. So Purva Paksha means the first half. So the first half is the first answer to the question or answer on the topic that we get, and normally the system is to give the opponent's argument first, and then to give either other arguments against the final view, right, or to simply give the final view which defeats the opponent's view. So here he's giving some reasons why we don't accept this. Why don't we accept that the soul is coextensive with the body? He says, firstly, because such a view is against Shruti. So if we could, there's a footnote here which says Sri Bhasya 2, 32, and 34. So we should look in the Sri Bhasya for these arguments. So obviously we're not going to go and look in the Sri Bhasya right now for these arguments, but anybody is free to go and read the Sri Bhasya, which is a commentary on the Vedanta Sutras by Ramanuja, to get the arguments against this particular Jain view. So what happens in the Vedanta Sutra is that each commentator pulls different quotes from the Upanishads to support his view, his interpretation of a particular sutra or a particular topic. A topic in the topics in the Vedanta Sutra are all logically placed one after another, and the topics are called adhikaranas. So there's an adhikarana which deals with, or a topic which deals with this, and therefore he's quoted that. So secondly, so that's firstly, so we have to go there to find which quotes from the Upanishads Ramanuja has pulled to show us that this view is incorrect. So first of all, it's against the view of the Shruti. Secondly, there are yogins who take many bodies, and in their case, it will not be possible to understand the nature of the soul as held by them. So there are some rare occasions. There are some rare instances quoted by the Sri Vaishnavas, by Ramanuja, right, where a yogi could control more than one body. And so this has been explained again there in Sri Bhasya. We have to go and we have to look there to see a full explanation. But this is very rare. So it doesn't mean that his soul is split. Somehow or other, his consciousness is able to pervade a couple of different bodies. But this is for a yogi, so it's not normally a thing which is accepted. Okay, so number 15, the basis of knowledge means that it is the substratum of knowledge. Well, substratum is just really another word for basis. So this sutra doesn't tell us a whole lot. The word chit not only means consciousness, but it means knowledge. So the self or the individual self or the jivatman is considered to be consciousness it's the form of pure knowledge. So we might ask, well, why is it that we have to learn things? Why don't we know everything if we're pure knowledge? So that is because of many factors, specifically being in this world and being covered by illusion or ignorance. Ignorance in Sanskrit is ajnana. Jnana means knowledge. So what is the opposite of jnana? The opposite of knowledge is ignorance. So that is able to cover the soul. And the illustrations or the analogies Lord Krishna gives in Bhagavad Gita on this is he says, like a mirror is covered with dust, like the baby in the mother's womb is covered by the womb, or like a spark is covered by fire. Sorry, not by fire, by smoke. A spark is covered by smoke. You might have a big blazing fire, and then there's some smoke, and then there's small sparks. So the blazing fire is compared to the Paramatma, the Supreme. The Supreme can never be, the full fire, the big fire can never be completely covered by smoke. But small parts of the fire, which is the analogy of the individual souls, can be covered by the smoke. They can be obscured. So like that. So in this way, a mirror covered by dust doesn't give us the proper reflection. So we don't see the true knowledge of ourselves and what we look like if we look into a mirror which is dirty. The baby in the womb is unaware of outside what's going on outside until it's born, and it's able to directly perceive the outside world. So it's also covered. Or like and in fact, we can this reminds us of the Shikshastakam, the very first verse of Shikshastakam by Sri Chaitanya that Gaudiya Vaishnavas quote sometimes. Cheto Darpana Marjanam. Marjana means to clean. Darpana means a mirror, right? And saying Cheta means it has to do with chitta, or the heart, or the soul. The intelligence is to be cleaned like cleaning a mirror, So that's what he says. So he also gives this illusion, or this analogy that Lord Krishna gives in the Bhagavad Gita, that the soul in this material world is like a dirty mirror. It needs to be cleaned. So that doesn't mean that the soul itself is dirty. It means that the dirt is covering, the mirror itself is not dirty, but there's dirt covering the mirror. There's smoke covering the spark. There's a womb covering the embryo, the baby. Okay, so continuing on with, as I said, this particular sutra doesn't tell us a whole lot, just says the basis of knowledge is the substratum of knowledge. Okay, we'll see what P.V. Nangacharya says in a moment. So this is text number 16. It may be asked why the soul is considered a substratum of knowledge and not knowledge itself, as it is held in Advaita Vedanta and Buddhism. Okay, so exactly the nature of the soul, right? Because previously I just said the soul is considered knowledge. So they're saying here the soul is not considered knowledge itself, but is considered the substratum of knowledge, right? It's a very subtle distinction, and so let's see what he says. The reply is to this question being asked had the soul been knowledge itself, then the awareness would be of the form I am knowledge, and not that I know. But the awareness is always in the form of I know, etc. Thus, the soul is the substratum of knowledge and not of the nature of knowledge. The awareness I know is possible when knowledge is different from myself. Okay, so, and 17. While explaining the nature of the soul, it is considered to be a knower, and that is why an agent and an enjoyer. That is, as an active and purposeful being, because both action and enjoyment are the special forms of knowledge itself. That's sort of an interesting slogan. Action and enjoyment are special forms of knowledge, is what he's saying here. That's a little bit tough to understand. Okay, but in any case, he's mentioning that the soul is a doer, a karta, and also a bhokta, an enjoyer. The soul enjoys. Right. Okay, so let's see exactly how P.B. Nangacharya, or specifically Satyamurti Iyengar talks about these. So how is the soul considered to be atomic in size? It has been stated in the scriptures, meaning the Shruti, right? The Vedas, that the soul is located in the region of the heart. Then leaves it, then goes to the upper worlds and then comes down. So it may leave the body at the time of death and go to another body. Hence, the soul is understood to be of the size of an atom. The relevant scriptural texts, such as Utkranti Gatya Gatenam of Brahma Sutra, need to be referred to in this context. Well, if the soul is merely of the size of an atom and stays in the cardiac region, how does it experience all at once pain and pleasure from head to foot, that is, all over the body? Such an experience of the atom-sized soul seated in the heart is due to the permeation all over of its inherent attributive knowledge, which is called in Sanskrit Dharma Bhuta Jnana, right? Attributive knowledge from where it is seated. This is like the dispersal in different directions of the rays of a gem, the sun, and the lamp located in a particular place. So we see the Brahma Sutra, the specific Brahma Sutra can be seen Gunadva O Alokavat, and the commentary thereon in Shribhashya. Apart from this experience of the pervasive knowledge inside the same body, even the simultaneous assumption of a number of bodies by one and the same individual, as the sage Shobari did, is achieved only by this very process, namely pervasion of the soul's attributive knowledge. So somehow or other, this rishi or this yogi, sage Shobari, was able to pervade several bodies with his one consciousness, his attributive consciousness, or Dhamma Bhuta Jnana. Okay, so going back to the main text. There are the followers of the Sankhya system. Now, there are two systems of Sankhya. Sankhya just means basically counting. We can think of Sankhya as being the Indian version of empirical knowledge or science. So there's one form of Sankhya that believes in God, that accepts God, another form of Sankhya which does not believe in God, which is atheistic Sankhya. Here, I'm not sure what they talk about. They're probably talking about the atheistic Sankhya, usually when it's criticized, the atheists, because, of course, we accept the evolution of different elements in creation according to the Sankhya system, but we do not accept the Nirishwara Sankhya, which denies God. So there are followers of the Sankhya system who consider Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, meaning goodness, passion, and ignorance, as being responsible for action and not the soul. Right? But this is not correct. When the soul is not active, then it's not possible to consider it to be that which acts according to the Shastras and also as a purposeful being. So if we look in the Bhagavad Gita also, the Bhagavad Gita mentions that there are five causes of action. One of them is the super soul, one of them is the soul. We have time, we have the body, we have the senses, we have the modes of nature. These are different things which are causes of action. So it's not that Sattva, Tamas, and Rajas, these attributes or gunas or modes in this world can act by themselves. They need the soul or the super soul, the supreme soul, to activate them. So the soul is definitely an actor. Okay, continuing on, we have the activity of the soul in worldly affairs is not due to its own nature. It is generated by its own contact with the gunas. So it has a contact with these modes of material nature, goodness, passion, ignorance. And this is also mentioned in Shribhashya 2.3.33. Thus, the activity of the soul depends upon God, and it is not free or independent. This is also mentioned in 2, 3, 40 to 41 of Sri Bhakti. So, question comes, if the soul is the substratum of knowledge and not of the nature of knowledge, then how is it regarded as knowledge itself in the scriptures? Right. The reply is the soul is not manifest without knowledge. Knowledge is its essential quality. Knowledge is its essential quality. Okay, so it seems like we're splitting hairs here when we say the soul isn't knowledge, but the soul's essential nature is knowledge. It's like saying sugar is not sweetness, but sugar is always sweet. So the soul is identified only because of knowledge. Therefore, sometimes said to be knowledge, it is just the substratum of knowledge. Okay, again, we're splitting hairs here. In order to get into the fine details of this, we definitely need a commentary by Manabala Mahamuni, or we need to go deeply into Sri Bhasya. Okay. So continuing on, we have guided by God means that all its activities are done due to the will of God. So although the soul is an actor, the soul acts according to the will of God, like that. So there's a big argument in Western philosophy between free will and determinism, right? Is everything predetermined? Is everything predetermined, or do we have some sort of free will, like that? So what the Sri Vaishnavas are saying here is they're saying there is free will, there is the possibility of the soul acting like that, but actually, in actual fact, the soul is guided by God. The soul is guided by God. So we can think of, just like we've been reading some other scriptures, some other Rahasya Granthas even by Pillai Lokacharya, where he describes the soul as more or less like an inanimate object that belongs to God. So that would tend to be more towards the deterministic side rather than the free will side. Other Vaishnavas, we've heard them talk about the minute freedom or the minute independence of the soul. So there is this ability of the soul to act, but the soul normally doesn't act, or cannot. The action cannot be carried out to its completion without also the sanction of God. So this is why we talk about in the Gita, it says that there are these 5 causes of action. God is one of them. So without God, there is no action. Okay, so even though the soul is an actor, can't act alone. So guided by God means that all its activities are due to the will of God. Or, as all activities of the body are guided by the soul, similarly the entire souls are guided by the will of God. So he's giving another analogy here, and he's saying, just in the same way as we understand that our actions of our body are willed and made to happen by our soul, by our soul working, with thinking, willing, feeling, and willing, right, occurs, right? Similarly, by the will of God, which is called Satya Sankalpa, his divine, and the reason it's called Satya is it's always correct. His desire and his actions are always correct, right? They're always good and they're always correct. They're always not suspicious. Whereas our actions may not be, right? So Satya Sankalpa, the will of God, the entirety of souls, all the souls act according to the will of God. So continuing on, it says here, sustained by God means that apart from the being and the will of God, there is no existence of its own. Right? It is a part of God. It is intimately related to God. It cannot exist independent of God. That is why God is considered to be the sustainer as well as the soul of the sustained. So God is the sustainer, the supporter of the soul, and the pervader of the soul. And therefore, God is considered to be the soul of the soul. Right? The soul, the concept of soul is that which pervades and that which controls. So we know in our body that which pervades and controls and supports our body is our soul. So now, what sustains and controls and supports our soul? That is God. He is the soul of the soul. Okay, so let's have a look at the other text and see if we can get any more information. These are some little bit obtuse discussions here, and we went up to, what have we got to 22? Okay, so 18. The soul is unmanifest, that is, it cannot be apprehended by the sense organs of sight, etc., in just the same way as they append pots, clothes, etc. So the soul is unmanifest, and therefore it cannot be apprehended by the sense organs of sight. In the same way that we see ordinary material objects like pots and clothes and whatever. The soul can be apprehended only by the mind. So we have a mental understanding. We have we can say it's an academic or intellectual understanding of what the soul is, because we observe how the soul acts and how the soul reacts and how the soul controls and supports and pervades the body. So because we know theoretically, we understand the soul to exist. Another example would be like, how do we know that the wind exists? We can't see the wind, but when the wind blows through the tree, we see the leaves of the tree moving. If we had a film, a silent film without sound, and we could see the trees leaves moving, then we would say, oh, it's a windy day. But we can't hear the wind. So we can perceive in that silent film, we can't hear the wind. We can just simply see the trees moving. So when we see the trees moving, we infer the action of the wind. So similarly here, we infer that there is a soul because of how we understand the soul supporting, controlling, and pervading the body. So it is, however, not on a par with the mythical skyborn lotus or horses horns. It says here horses horns, but normally they say a hare's horns, a rabbit's horns, or the son of a barren woman. Okay, so these are all concepts in the mind. So somebody might say, okay, you conceive of the soul in the mind. So you say, because you can conceive of the soul in the mind, because you understand the soul in certain ways, therefore the soul must exist. This is your proof that the soul exists. But here's some other things which can be conceived in the mind but don't exist. They don't have any reality except in your mind, right? So in the mind, we can conceive of what's called an akash pushpa, a lotus, a flower which is there in the sky. Flowers do not appear in the sky because there's nowhere for them to grow from. They have to either grow from the water or they have to grow from the earth. So they cannot be in the sky. A horse, or the traditional description is a hare or a rabbit, does not have a horn. A horse's horn, some people talk about this unicorn. Unicorn is like a horse with a horn. So there is no such thing. There is no such animal as far as we know, okay? So what it's saying here is horse's horn is also, it's something that we can imagine in our mind, but it doesn't exist in reality. Third thing is the son of a barren woman. As soon as we say a woman is barren, it means she doesn't have any son. She doesn't have any children. So a son of a barren woman is also, it's a concept in the mind that we can have a concept. We can say the words, but the words mean nothing because there is no such person. There is no such thing. So which cannot exist, which cannot be comprehended by the sense organs because these things just do not exist. Right. So what he's saying is there's a difference here. The soul cannot be, he's first of all saying the soul cannot be understood by the sense organs. We can't see it, can't feel it, we can't touch it, we can't smell it, we can't taste it, right? Our ordinary sense organs cannot understand the soul. But that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. There are other things which we also can't see, touch, taste, smell, or sense. So, such as the son of a barren woman, horse's horns or hare's horns, and mythical skyborn lotus. Those things we can't also perceive, right, with our senses because they don't exist. So unlike that, the soul actually exists. The soul cannot be thought of as belonging to the same class or category as non-sentient things, right? So So the Bhagavad Gita 225, avyaktoyam, achintyoyam, avyakta and achintya, right? Mentions that the soul is indescribable, right? So it cannot be thought about as the same as a material thing. It's a material thing like a pot or clothes, which was being mentioned. The soul is not an assemblage of parts like the material things. It has no parts or limbs, but is made up solely of knowledge. The soul is immutable. That is not changing. Unlike the non-sentient matter, which undergoes modifications of form and size, the soul remains in one state and does not undergo changes. And he's again quoting from Bhagavad Gita 225. The soul is denoted by the word akshara, or non-changing. The other meaning for the word akshara in Sanskrit is a letter of the alphabet. That's also considered unchangeable, right? The words and sentences and paragraphs and whole books are made up of letters. Those letters don't change. There's only so many letters in the English alphabet. There's only so many letters in the Sanskrit alphabet. They never change. So they are considered to be non-changing or eternal or immutable. So the soul being as described above, it is beyond the mischief of sharp instruments, fire, water, air, etc. I'm thinking here that the numbering of the sutras here in this version is a little different from the numbering of the sutras in the other version, because it seems like we're not getting exactly the same overlay when we discuss it. Instruments shall not cleave it. Fire cannot burn it. Water cannot drench it, nor air dry it, nor the sun wither it. And we dealt with that in a previous sutra in the other text, 2:23-24. So here he gives the Bhagavad Gita verses right here in the commentary. So now we come to this point about the Jains. The Jains hold that the soul is the size of the body, so as to account for the soul's experience of pain and pleasure in different parts of it. But that is at variance with the Vedic texts that declare the soul as akshara, or unchanging. Okay, so remember that we've defined the soul as spiritual, and spiritual, we've said, means it's unchanging. It doesn't change, so it's eternally the same, right? Even though there are different types of souls, there are souls who are eternally liberated, who have complete knowledge, and there are some souls that don't have complete knowledge because they're covered. The spark is the same, whether it's covered with the smoke or not, is the only difference, right? So here we're talking about a variance with the Vedic text. So the Vedic text explains that spiritual things are always the same. So if the soul is spiritual, therefore it should always be the same. So the Jains theory is that the human soul is the size of the human body, the elephant soul is the size of the elephant, the ant soul is the size of the ant. However, the problem with this theory is, very logically, if we change bodies, right, does our soul would change size. If in my next life I become an ant or an elephant, my soul would therefore shrink or expand, according to their theory, right? Therefore, we can't accept their theory because the soul can't change. So because the soul has this innate attribute of being spiritual and therefore not changing, therefore we can't accept, because we know the soul does take different bodies, and therefore we can't accept that the soul in an elephant or a soul in an ant is any different in size than the soul in a human being. Okay, in a human body, that is. So, but that is at variance with the Vedic texts that declare the soul to be akshara, or non-changing, right? So he's quoted some of those texts here. Amritakshara haraha, right? And atomic in size, eshonu tatma, and also balagra sata bhagasya, etc. Again, the soul, according to its desert, fruits of its actions, acquires the body of an elephant or an ant. So he's given the same examples that I have, the elephant and the ant. This is a very common explanation of how the Jains are wrong. So if the soul should be coextensive and co-expansive with the body it takes on from time to time, it has to alternatively bloat up to an enormous size of an elephant and shrink down to the size of a tiny ant, which sounds ludicrous indeed. Further, this view will not accord with the essential nature of the sage and yogis, who, by dint of their special attainments, assume different forms at different times. It would be nothing short of fantastic to imagine they're expanding or being cut to size to fit in with the different bodies they assume. This has been refuted at great length in Srivasya. So if we continue on, the soul is the substratum of knowledge. This is what we were just talking about in the other version, the other edition. The soul is the substratum of knowledge. That is, the repository or the seat of knowledge. The Upanishads say that the soul is knowledge itself, right? And is also the seat of knowledge. This is like unto its source, the lamp, both of which are bright. Okay, so the example given here is the soul is like a light, is like a lamp. So if we have a lamp, we put it in a dark room. After we light the lamp in a dark room, the rays of the lamp, of the light coming from the lamp, pervade the whole room. The lamp also has a form itself, and that lamp is also bright, right? It's not only spreading out rays of light, but the lamp itself is light. So we not only see, if we turn away from the lamp, we see where the light is pervading the whole room. But if we look directly at the light, we see the source of the light, and that is also bright. So that's what he's basically saying here, that the lamp, the soul is like a lamp. It itself is bright, it itself is knowledge, but it's also the source of knowledge, right? This consciousness or attributive consciousness or attributive knowledge, which is called in Sanskrit Dharma Adbhuta Jnana in the Sri Vaishnava system. So, that the soul is the residence of knowledge is supported by Vedic texts such as Vijnanata Atalamare, Kena, Vijnanayat, and Janatyevayam Purushaha, etc. So, if, however, the soul is only knowledge and not its source, right? Okay, so here's the point. So the other commentators in the other edition, they haven't actually got it right. As I said, the soul is knowledge, but is also the source of knowledge. What they were saying, they were trying to say in the other edition, they're trying to say the soul isn't knowledge itself, but it is the source of knowledge. The soul is both the knowledge and the source of knowledge, and so. However, if the soul is only knowledge and not its source, as the Buddhists and others hold. So there are some Advaitins and Buddhists, right? Monists and Buddhists. Buddhists are nihilists. They believe in nothingness. There are, of course, different forms of Buddhism, all coming originally from India, but they've branched out. And the original four schools of Buddhism, Sautrantika, Madhyamika, slips my mind the other two right now, but Yogacara and Vyabhasika. Okay, these are the four original types, right? They deal with nothingness, and whereas Advaita deals with one homogeneous, impersonal Brahman. So, if however the soul is only knowledge, and see they quote the Advaitins. Of course, Buddhists don't quote the Vedas, but the Advaitins quote the Vedas, and they say, Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma. Brahma or Brahman or spiritual things are Satyam. They're truth, meaning their existence. Sat means to eternally exist. So something which is true eternally exists. That's why sometimes they say that this world is not true. It doesn't really exist because they say it's not eternal because it goes through modifications. right? The soul and God never go through modifications. So satyam, jnanam, knowledge, anantam, bliss. Anandam. Anandam Brahma. Anandam means bliss. Ananta is also there, unlimited, but anyway. So Satyam Jnanam Anandam Brahma. Okay. So if, however, the soul is only knowledge and not its source, as Buddhists and certain others hold, the expression I know has no meaning or relevance, and it should be reshaped as I am knowledge. So we have this feeling that I know something, We don't have this feeling that I am knowledge. So that's what he's saying. So, but expressions such as I have grasped this meaning, I quite follow this, etc., are very much in vogue. This means the individual soul is receptive to all that knowledge. And when it is said that the individual soul is the knower, it again is it should be deemed to have been said by implication that the soul is also the agent or doer of the acts of commission and omission. Right? There are two types of acts. When we do not act, we also act in a way. Lord Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita also says this. He says, I act. I always say, everybody acts. Everyone, you can't refrain from action. So sometimes people say, no, I can refrain from action. I'll just stop acting. Even your stopping acting is called here by Pila Lokacharya an act of omission. You didn't do that. You didn't do that thing. That is an action. So we have to specifically, for instance, if I hold my breath, I'm not breathing. Right? That's an act. It's an actual action that I have to take to hold my breath when I'm doing pranayama or something like that. So I have to hold my breath like that in order to stop. There are some autonomic functions that go on in the human body. They just go on. If we can stop those things, right, that is called that is actually an act of omission, not allowing something to go forward that normally goes forward. So we either do something or we don't do something. In each case, we're acting. Right, so acts of commission and omission flowing from such knowledge and the experiencer of the fruits of those acts. The Sankhyas, again, we have this Sankhya philosophy, right? That's the Indian school of empiricism or science, says that the doership vests only in the gunas, sattvas, rajas, and tamas. We discussed this in the other edition. Actually, this edition is much clearer because he's doing this he's taking information from Manavala Mahamani's commentary, whereas the other edition, they don't seem to be at all looking at Manavala Mahamani's commentary. So the components of Prakriti, non-sentient matter, and not in the, excuse me, let's start again here. The Sankhya's say that the doership, right? We started out here saying that the soul is a karta, is a doer. Okay, so the Sankhya say that the doership is vested in only the gunas, the three attributes of goodness, passion, and ignorance, sattva, rajas, and tamas. So we know that's not true. We discussed this in the Bhagavad Gita. There are 5 causes of action, and the modes of material nature are part of it, but they're not the full story. So those people who say that they are the whole story, that the modes of material nature do the action, right? Goodness made me do it. Passion made me do it. Tamas made me do it. Ignorance made me do it. No, you also played a part. That's no excuse if you get up in court and say, passion made me do it. I killed him because of passion or ignorance, or I gave charity. I gave charity. It was only goodness that gave the charity, and I didn't have anything to do with it. No, that's not true. So the components of Prakriti, non-sentient matter, and not in the individual soul, who, however, tastes the fruits of the deeds, right? So, if the individual soul, here's the point being made: the individual soul has got nothing to do with the actions that are performed. If it's only the modes of material nature that are doing this, then why is it that the individual soul has to suffer or enjoy the reactions to these actions? Right? Normally, if somebody else kills somebody, why do I have to suffer for that? If somebody else gives charity, how do I get benefit from that? How do I benefit how do I come into the idea of being a donor? Why should I be praised by somebody else giving charity? Right? So these are all examples of actions which are done by other persons. They don't affect me. But because I'm affected, it's logical to understand, we're inferring this, that it's logical to understand that because I'm affected, because the soul is affected in the sense of traveling to different bodies and experiencing pains and pleasures that come from the reactions of unlimited karmas over different lifetimes. Because of that, we understand that the soul must be partly responsible, not fully responsible, but partly responsible. As we said, there's these 5 causes of action. So we can say we were in illusion, we were covered by tamas, we were covered by rajas, we were covered by passion, or we were influenced by these things, but ultimately we are also a part of that. So it's incorrect. The Sankhya's are incorrect to say that it's simply the modes of nature which are causing action to be done. Right? They should read Bhagavad Gita, because Bhagavad Gita clearly says that's not the fact. This cuts across the obligation of the individual soul to obey the dictates of the scriptures, right? So here's the next point that he brings up, right? If we say that it's the modes of material nature that do all the actions, the modes of material nature did the sin. The modes of material nature did the sattvic, the punya, the pious activity, right? So that would go against the dictates of the scriptures, because in the scriptures we see do this and don't do that. We see many, many rules in the scriptures for us to follow. Well, if we can't follow them, if we're not the person who does, if we don't have anything to do with the action, then we can't follow the dictates, right? It's no use telling a person who cannot follow a rule, right? If I'm not the doer, don't tell me the rule, right? Don't give me the scriptures. The scriptures are here for me to follow. If I can't follow them, there's no point to them, right? If the action is done by something else or some other thing, don't tell me. The soul experiencing the fruits of the acts committed by the gunas, for which the individual is not responsible, would be meaningless and irrational, which is what we just discussed, right? It would be completely meaningless that we have to suffer or enjoy for the actions of some other thing. In this case, the modes of nature. The scriptures or shastras are those that ordain by instilling the requisite knowledge to do certain acts and to refrain from doing others. Right. So we discussed that. We're discussing that above. This knowledge can be imparted only to the knowledgeable individual and not to inert matter. There's no point to telling a piece of matter, don't sin or don't perform pious acts, because the matter is even the modes of nature, we can't tell them anything because they're not sentient. They're not the knowers of anything. They're not knowers. So for knowledge to exist, there has to be a knower, first of all. For knowledge to exist, there has to be a knower. There has to be a known. There has to be something to be known outside of the knower. And there has to be a process by which the knower knows the known. Right? There could also be there could also be ignorance. Just like when we see light, that means that there is darkness, right? Wherever if we say that there's light, there must also be darkness, which is the absence of light. So the absence of knowledge is ajnana or ignorance. So we know that there's a knower, we know that there's a known, we know that there's a process by which the knower knows the known, and we also know that there may be something which will block the knower from knowing the known. Does that make sense? Right. So all of these things we know. These are all things that if we think about the soul, we can understand. So this knowledge can be imparted only to a knowledgeable individual, not to inert matter, which is devoid of the faculty of perception and understanding. The dictates of the shastras, which are in the forms of do's, do this, that, or the other, and don'ts, don't do this, that, or the other, right, can hardly be addressed to prakriti, the gunas, because the gunas, after all, are part of prakriti. In Sankhya, In Sankhya, there's an evolution of Prakriti. Prakriti is a conglomeration of material elements, and it evolves, in the process of creation according to Sankhya, which is acceptable, right, into different elements, right? Even the scientists admit that the different elements are created by a process of evolution, scientific evolution. So the Prakriti, the gunas, or the modes of nature, which are part of that system, they are also non-sentient. The gunas are non-sentient. Rajas, tamas, and sattva, gunas, passion, ignorance, they're non-sentient. So he who enjoys the fruits, such as going to Swarga or heaven, or ascending to the heavens, ought to be the doer to merit those fruits, right? The person who gets the merit of those fruits. And he quotes here a couple of different quotations. Swarga kamo yajeta. Yajeta means that okay, mumukshuhu brahma upasita, right? Which means, first one means that through our desires, we go to Swarga or to heaven, and through worship of the Supreme, we go to liberation, like that. So the Sankhya, in both cases, an action is performed. The Sankhya concept is opposed to the teachings of the Gita. So when he says the concept is opposed to the teachings of the Gita, he's talking about the first Sankhya concept that mentioned up here, that in Nirishvara Sankhya, the idea is that the modes of material nature are the doers and not the soul. So that concept is against the concept in the Gita. The concept given in the Gita is karya karna. Karya means the doer. Karna means the cause, right? Katritve hetuhu. Hetu means the cause, right? Prakriti ruchite. Purushas sukha dukkha anam. Voktritve hetu ruchite. So this is a quote from Bhagavad Gita. This theme has been elaborated in the Sri Bhasya while commenting on the Brahma Sutra. Karta Shastrartha Bhat. Yeah, I find it's a bit quite. By not giving the commentary of Manavala Mahamuni in both these texts, it makes it very difficult for anybody who hasn't studied the Gita and Sri Bhasya, the Gita Bhasya and Sri Bhasya, to understand exactly these quotes. And therefore, what is needed for a full study of this text is to go to these two and also read at the same time, or to read previously to this, at least to go and look at these quotations. Okay. So having established that, the doership belongs to the individual soul. So we've established that. We've logically understood that. We've understood it from statements also in the Shruti and the Vedas and the Upanishads. So having established that the doership belongs to the individual soul, will all that he does be in keeping with his essential nature? Okay, so we've now established that the soul is the doer. He's the doer of acts of commission and acts of omission also. So now, will every act that he does be in keeping with his essential nature? No, whatever he does in regard to the enjoyment of worldly pleasures, he does under the influence of, rather in association with, the gunas. Prakriti kriyamanani, gune kamani, etc. Kartaham iti manyate. So this is Bhagavad Gita 3:27. So very, very easy to understand. The question posed next is whether the agency action of the individual is dependent on the Lord or independent of him. Is the agency or action of the individual dependent on the Lord or independent? Well, I already gave the answer to that. There's 5 causes of action given in the Gita. As knower, jnata, doer, karta, and bhokta, enjoyer, the individual soul possesses a consciousness which expresses itself in such states as thinking, jnana, desiring, chikirsha, and striving, prayatna. But these states are controlled by the Lord, without whose assent the thinking, etc. What does it say? Thinking, desiring, and striving, thinking, feeling, and willing, right? Cannot blossom into action. So it's also said, not a blade of grass moves without the will of the Lord. So he is one of the five aspects of every action. The individual doership is therefore dependent on the Lord. At this stage, a doubt may arise as to why, in that case, the individual should at all be affected by the merits and demerits of such acts, right? Why can't we just blame it all on God, right? Without God's grace, without God's blessing, without God's acquiescence, we cannot do anything. If he's if he's an essential part of the five parts of action, of any action, then we can just blame it on him. Why can't we just blame it on him? Right? I didn't kill that person. I didn't give that charity. God did it. So at this stage, a doubt may arise as to why, in that case, the individual should at all be affected by the merits and demerits of such acts. So why should I suffer or enjoy for that thing which would not have occurred without the agreement of God, without the acceptance of God, without him being part of the procedure, part of the action. The freedom to act is no doubt the Lord's gift to the individual as to enable the latter to utilize it for his good. And I would say not only for lowercase his good, but for uppercase his good, right? God gives us this ability to act, right? Not only for our own good, but also for his good, because we are his property and we are his servants. So the Lord as the Antaryami means the super soul, the soul, the form of God residing within the body, mentioned here as residing within the heart. We can also think of it as residing in the mind, right? The universal controller residing inside every soul remains neutral or passively quiescent in regard to the initial effort of the individual in the exercise of this gift of freedom of action. Okay, so that was sort of a convoluted sentence there. Let's just say that again. The Lord, who is the Antaryami, the super soul, the universal controller residing inside every soul, remains neutral and passively quiescent in regard to the initial effort of the individual in the exercise of this gift of freedom of action. So God is giving us this minute freedom of action, right? And he remains passive. This is also described in the Upanishads, a very common analogy which is given that the body is like a tree, like a tree full of green leaves, and there are two green birds in the tree. We look at the tree, we can't see the birds because they're also the same color as the tree. So we look in the body, we can't see the soul, we can't see the super soul, we can't see the Atman or the Paramatman. But they're there. They're there within the body, and the Atman pervades the body with its consciousness, and the Atman is a doer. The individual soul is a doer. But so there's a bird in the tree who is pecking the fruits, who is trying to eat the different fruits of his labors or whatever it is like that. And there's another bird there sitting there as a witness who is allowing that other bird to do those actions. And that is God. That is the super soul. So that's the analogy given in the Upanishads. So thereafter, the Lord not only watches approvingly the progress of the individual and makes him prosper in his earnest endeavors, that is, those that conform to the scriptural injunctions, but also infuses in him, in an ever-increasing measure, the relish for doing good acts. So this is the Lord's desire, is that we should follow the scriptural injunctions and we should act in a good way. Right. On the other hand, when the individual moves in the retrograde direction, right, if he moves to do unholy acts or acts against the scriptures or acts against his own nature or the nature of God, right, then the Lord visits him with his displeasure and disapproval in the form of punishments, sorrows, and sufferings, right, thereby giving him a chance to correct himself and tread the right path. So he doesn't stop us from making mistakes. But when we do make mistakes, when we do things against our nature and against his nature, then we will suffer either in this lifetime or in a subsequent lifetime, and that is called karma. So If the soul is the substratum or seat of knowledge, why is it mentioned in the scripture as knowledge? Right? Yo vigyane, vigyanam, yagyam kanate. He gives some quotations here from the scripture that the soul is mentioned as knowledge. As explained earlier, the soul is able to project itself unaided by eternal knowledge, unaided by external knowledge, even as knowledge is self-revealing, just as the lamp is self-revealing. When the lamp reveals everything in the room, the light of the lamp reveals everything in the room, it also reveals itself, right? When the soul reveals consciousness or knowledge of other things, it also reveals itself. As Descartes said, we understand the soul exists because we can understand other things. And therefore we understand that we are a knower, and therefore the knower has to exist. So when we understand different knowledges of different things, because of our senses, we understand that there's something behind that. When we, as I said, there's a knower, there's a known, and there's knowledge. So when we see knowledge, there's knowledge. There has to be a source of the knowledge. There has to be a person who is knowing the knowledge. There also has to be an external world that's being known. So all of these things are real, and that's called Satkaryavad or Parinamavad, which is opposed to what the Advaitins say, because the Advaitins' favorite slogan is Brahma Satyam, only spirit is real, and Jagat Mithya, only spirit is real or eternal. This world is Mithya, is illusion. Doesn't exist according to them. Like that. Has to exist because we know it. We know it. Okay, so I explained earlier, the soul is able to project itself unaided by external knowledge. Even as knowledge is self-revealing and makes other things known, the soul is self-luminous knowledge as well as the possessor of attributive knowledge. So the lamp has two types of light. It has the light that reveals itself, and it has the light that reveals other things around it. So that light which reveals itself is called attributive knowledge. It's an attribute of the lamp. And that light which reveals other things is called so there's self-luminous knowledge, and then there's attributive knowledge. Yeah. So which makes other things known. So attributive knowledge, makes other things known. Self-revealing knowledge makes the self known. Hence, it is denoted by as knowledge. That is, the lamp and the light it throws all around, both of which are luminous. The lamp is luminous, and the light is also luminous. I'm finding this other version to be very. But let's have a look again at the other version. But I really think that Satyamurti Iyengar's version is much better. The other version. Where did we finish off on the other version? These people who have translated this don't seem to have gone very deeply into the commentary. Sustained by God means being apart from being, from the being and will of God. It has no existence of its own. It is a part of God and is ultimately related to God. It cannot exist independent of God. That is why God is considered to be the sustainer as well as the soul of the sustained. We did that already. Text 23. Subservient to God means it has nothing of its own. Right? Just as sandalwood, flower, beetle, etc., exists for the use of others, right? Sandalwood paste, right? Or flowers, right? Or betel nut, which is something that you chew like an after dinner mint, right? Okay, these things don't exist for themselves. They exist for the use of others. For the use of others. Is what he's saying here. Similarly, the soul is all devotion to God and no other interest of its own. Right? It should be. The relation is not like ours with house, land, son, wife, etc., that they can exist independently. Just as the body cannot exist separately from the soul, similarly, the soul, Chit, cannot exist separately from God, because the soul the soul is the body of God. That's just another way of saying God is the soul of the soul. God is the soul of the soul. The soul is therefore the body of God. Okay, souls are of three kinds. Now it seems here. Okay, souls are of three kinds. We have souls in bondage, souls, liberated souls, and we have souls that were never in bondage. They're eternal. So these are called buddhas, muktas, and nityas. So buddhas, in this material world, we are buddhas. We're covered by ignorance, right? We're in bondage, the bondage of samsara, which is the wheel of birth and death and reincarnation, right? If we get free from this somehow, right, we become muktas, we become liberated souls. We were here and now we can go there and we can enjoy eternal bliss, unlimited knowledge in moksha, liberation. There are souls that never were covered. They never had ignorance. They never were covered. They were eternally in that position, right? It's also mentioned in the Vedas. Tad Vishnu Paramam Padam Sada Pasyanti Surayaha. Sada means eternally. Sada means always. Pasyanti, they see. Surayaha. Surayaha means the nityas, the eternal servants of God. They are eternally seeing God in that highest place, like that. That is mentioned in the Veda, in the Rig Veda 122.20, by the way. Okay, it's a very famous verse. Souls which are never in bondage, that is the eternals or nityas. So in Sri Vaishnavism, we call them nityas, muktas, and buddhas. In some other forms of Vaishnavism, they call them nitya buddhas, eternally covered, eternally bound. They call them muktas, and they call them, or sometimes they call the nityas as nitya siddhas, eternally perfected. So souls in bondage are those that remain in the process of transmigration. Liberated souls are those which have been released from the process of transmigration. Souls eternally free, like Adishesha, Vishvaksena, others like Garuda, etc., these are all servants of the Lord, are those which have never been involved in the process of transmigration. Now, there are some forms of Vaishnavism that believe that all souls have to come here and have to be in ignorance, in illusion first before they can go there. So that there are no nityas actually. Everybody's either a buddha or a mukta. Everybody is either bound or is free from being bound. But in order to be free, you have to first of all be bound. So some people have this idea, and there's a certain type of logic to it. You can say in order to be free, really free, you have to know what it means to be bound. Okay. So anyway, let's continue on. But this is not the concept in Vishishta Dvaita Vedanta. Okay, so just as water, this is text 25 of this edition, just as water in a pot gets warm and makes a sound of boiling when it comes in contact with fire, right? Similarly, the soul comes in contact with matter and gets interested in karma, in doing different acts, and vasana, desire. When the soul is disassociated with matter, then the avidya or ignorance is inevitably removed. Okay, so this brings it to the point about jiva mukti and videha mukti, which we're going to talk about. Let's have a look at the footnote here and see what 8 says. Okay, so this is a quotation from, he is giving a quotation here from Vishnu Purana 6.7.23. Okay, so here we're talking about the soul, when it's associated with matter, right? It gets interested in doing these different karmas or activities, either good or bad, either pious or sinful, right? And also has these desires. The desire coming into contact with matter. There are particular desires that come to mind of the soul, right? So the soul wants to do this, wants to do that. Thinking, feeling, and willing occurs. Okay. So when the soul is disassociated with matter, and what I mean by matter is, I mean not only gross matter, earth, water, fire, air, ether, the material body, but also the mind, intelligence, and ego, which is subtle matter, which is also the gross matter is called the stula sharira. Stula means gross. Shukshma sharira means body. And we have also a shukshma sharira, which is a subtle body, which is made of mind, intelligence, and ego. These are also material elements. So when the soul is completely divorced from these, What does Krishna say in the Bhagavad Gita? In the 7th chapter, he says, Bhumir apona lo vayu kamanu bhuriya hankara iti amme. So he says, Bina prakriti rastada. Prakriti, these are material elements. All of these things, all of these 8 things, the gross and the subtle, are all material. And he says, Bina prakriti. Bina means that they're separated from me. They're separate from me, right? Now, the soul, they're not separate from us. We're not mixed with them like oil and water, right? We float above them, where the soul is different in nature. But then the spark is different in nature than the smoke, right? But however, we are affected by them, just as the spark is covered by the smoke. So we're affected by the fact that we are covered by, first of all, a gross body, right? And also a subtle body. So when we're completely divorced from the gross and subtle body, means not even death, because at death, the soul leaves the gross body, but it's still carried by the vasanas, by the desires, and by the subtle body, right? The mind, intelligence, the ego, right? Until we actually attain the supreme, right, and go to the supreme destination, we are not completely divorced from all aspects of the material body. So what it says here is, it's saying that moksha, or liberation, only occurs when the soul is completely divorced from not only the gross body but the subtle body, right? So that is the process in Vishishta Dvaita we talk about. Videha mukti. Deha means body. Videha means without a body. The liberation without a body. Liberation only occurs when there's no body, either gross or subtle. So there are other people, there are other Vaishnavas even, and other schools like the Advaita school of Shankaracharya came up with this idea that you can be somehow liberated but still be in contact with the body. But here, very clearly, what Pilalokacharya is saying, when you're in contact with the body, somehow or other you want to perform these actions, either pious or impious or sinful, and you have these desires, these specific desires. So as long as the soul is associated with the body, there are these desires and there are these good and bad actions. So which result in karmas, and the body itself is made of these karmas from the previous birth and from this birth, right? If I perform some action in this birth, and I cut myself, right, then I always have a scar. So similarly, if I do some bad action in the previous life, I create the next body in the next life through that action. So, and desire, right? We also know from desire, the Gita also says, yam yam bhavi smaram bhavam, whatever you think of at the time of death, that you will attain. So what you're thinking about at the time of death is the culmination of your actions through the life, and therefore you are taken by your desire to the next body. Just as in this life, we are taken by our desire somewhere. We desire to go to a particular event, or a restaurant, or a show, or something like that. We have that desire in our mind, thinking, feeling, willing. We actually get up and do it like that. So because of our desires, we travel to a certain place and do a certain thing like that. So similarly, at the time of death, the soul is also, if it's desiring that, it will desire and go to another body like that. Okay. So that's understood in Bhagavad Gita. So very, very simple. I'd say all the 3 types of souls are infinite in number, right? So this is also something which is not accepted by all the different schools, right? For instance, Adi Shankara, there are some Adi Shankara will say no. That the soul or spirit is only one. There's only one spirit or one soul. This is absurd. Actually, it's an absurd idea, but it's their idea in Advaita that there's only one homogeneous, nirguna, without qualities, spiritual entity, like that. So you are me, and I am you, and we are God, and everything's one. That's Advaita. So why is this absurd? There are many reasons why it's absurd. Number one is they say that there's jivan mukti, that a person can even become liberated even within this lifetime. If that person becomes liberated, right? If we go and we meet the Shankaracharya of Kanchipuram or something like that, and people say, "Oh, he's a jivan mukta. I met him, this old Shankaracharya, and everybody said he's a jivan mukta," like that. So if he's a jivan mukta, if there's only one jiva, if there's only one homogeneous Brahman spirit, right? Then if that spirit is free, every spirit is free. All spirit is free, right? So how can there be one person liberated and not another person if everybody's one? If everybody's one, even admitting that if everybody's one, that somehow we could all be an illusion, then if somebody gets out of illusion, then everybody must get out of illusion. That would be the opposite of this, that there's only one soul. So obviously, there has to be more than one soul, because some souls are in illusion and some souls are in liberation, right? Some souls are in moksha, they're not in illusion. So there are 3 types of souls and they're infinite in number, right? This is his statement. The Advaita Vedantins hold that the soul is only one. What did I tell you? This is going to come up. Because this book here, he's not only propounding the points of the Sri Vaishnavas, of the Vishishta Dvaitins, right, but he's knocking down the arguments of these other schools when appropriate. The Advaita Vedantins hold that the soul is only one. This is not proper, because if the soul is one, if there's only one soul, right, then if one is happy, no one should feel miserable. And that's a very simple example, right? So there's one soul who's a Jiva Mukta, and I go and see him and I say, why are you so happy and I'm not? He can't answer that question. He cannot answer that question. If you meet any Mayavadi, here's some questions that you could ask them. Any Advaitin, you can ask them these questions. They'll be totally baffled by these questions. They cannot answer these questions. So you go to them and say, you have realized that everything is one. Can you explain to me why am I unhappy? You are happy. You're extremely happy. You're Jivan Mukta. You're a liberated person. You're experiencing the bliss of Brahman, the one Brahman. You've merged into the oneness, right? Why then am I unhappy? Why are you happy and I'm unhappy? If I'm you, I should also be happy. If you're me, I should also be happy, right? They can't explain that, right? So it may be argued that this is a possibility, though the soul is one, yet due to different bodies. So this is what they say. This is what the answer will come. They say, yet due to differences of bodies, happiness and pain are experienced differently. This is not correct. The fact of experiencing pain in one and pleasure in another is not due to the differences of bodies, but due to the differences of souls, as in the case of so many bodies of Shibari. So anyway, we won't go into the story of Shibari at this point, but just to understand this simple point, right? It's not the fact that we have different bodies is why I'm suffering. It's the fact that we have different. It's not the different things which are known. Okay, so once again, we've got the knower, the known, and the process of knowing, right? Right? So one person knows bliss, knows happiness. Another person knows sadness, right? It's the person who knows those things. It's not the thing. It's not the known. It's not the object. The object doesn't know these things. It's not the body that knows these things. The body itself does not feel pleasure or pain. The body itself does not feel pleasure or pain. It's the soul that gets this knowledge of pleasure and pain from the body through the senses. The soul is the one who's the knower. The knowledge is the pain. The body is being cut or pampered, right? So it feels the pleasure or pain, right? But the soul is the one who knows. So it's the reason for one person knowing pleasure and another person knowing pain is that person is separate from the other person. Has to be, has separate consciousness. It doesn't mean that they have. It's not because they have separate bodies, and that's the example given here to illustrate that somehow is that there's this yogi that had different bodies. Right, so it's because he's the same soul in all the different bodies. He's pervading some other bodies. Okay, but he's feeling the same. If he's feeling happy, he's feeling happy in all those bodies. If he's feeling pain, he's feeling pain in all those bodies. Right, he's feeling the same, even though the bodies are different. Right, but he is the knower. The knower is the person who's feeling or experiencing the knowledge. Yeah. Okay. So, moreover, some souls are in bondage, some are liberated, and some are pupils, and some are teachers. So we have some souls are in bondage, and they're what we call babukshus. They're only interested in material sense gratification, and they know nothing about spiritual matters or transcendental matters. And there are others who are liberated and who are in complete knowledge. And then there's those who are in between, the mamukshus, the people who want to, they know something about spiritual life and they want to attain liberation, but they're still a little bit covered by ignorance and the modes of nature. And so he divides them up here into teachers and students. So you've got people who are teaching, other people who are students. In fact, teachers and students, the students are simply teachers waiting to learn more, and the teachers are simply students of their teachers, like that. So we always want to learn more. We always think of ourselves as students. No matter how much we learn, we have to learn more until we come to that point of moksha, of liberation, which of course is videha, beyond this body, right? Where we will know everything. This difference in the souls is not possible if the soul is one. So again, he's explaining here. How can we explain these different types of souls if the soul is one? How can we explain that there's a teacher and a student, right? If I go to a guru, I go to a Mayavadi guru, an Advaita guru, and I say to him, Guruji, teach me. But then I say, Guruji, why do you have to teach me? Student, I'm your student, but why am I a student? You're the teacher. If you say all is one, then I should also be the teacher. I should also know what you know, right? But you don't. You don't know what the teacher knows. You don't know what the other person knows. So therefore, we can understand by this that there are different souls, right? Besides, it is against the Shruti. And there's a footnote here that says, in the Vishnu Purana 6.2, because we were mentioning from Vishnu Purana, the last one. So the sage Sobari assumed 50 bodies and married 50 daughters of the king, Mindatri. Okay, so this is an exceptional story here in the Puranas, like that. It's an illustration. It's an example, right? It's not necessarily something that we have to, think too hard about. The point is here that there are some mentions in the Upanishads and mentions in the Vishnu Purana and the different Puranas about how to explain this by analogy, the analogy of Savari, but also by direct Upanishadic statement. Thus, it is not proper to accept the soul as one. Okay, so this is gone to a lot of. This is also mentioned in Svetashvatara Upanishad, right? So this quotation is very famous here, so everybody should know this. Nityo nam chetanas chetananam eko bahunam yo vididati kaman, right? So it means nityo nam. It means the one eternal of all eternals, the one chetana chetananam, the one sentient of all sentience. Eko bahunam. Eko means the one. Bahunam means the many. Yo vididati kaman, right? So it mentions the one, and it also mentions the many. So if you're an Advaitin, this is a very bad verse for you. If you're a follower of Shankara, you don't like this verse because this verse mentions many. And therefore you have to explain away this verse that it doesn't mean, when it says many, it doesn't really mean many, it means one. It's very difficult because it says many right there. Okay, so that's the thing with the Advaitins and the Dvaitins. They look at the Shruti and they see Gatika, they see Beta Shrutis and Abeta Shrutis. They see statements in the Veda that talk about difference and statements in the Veda that talk about oneness. And the Mayavadis, the Advaitins, they say, oh no, it's all one, and therefore we only accept as truth, absolute truth, the oneness statements. And the Dvaitins, the followers of Madhva, they say, no, we only accept the dualist statements. But the Vishishta Dvaitins, we accept that some things are one, some things are not one. Sometimes we can see something as one, but also different at the same time. So we understand oneness and difference are there, and we understand that there are not only quotes about oneness, quotes about difference, but also in the Vedas there are also quotes which can talk about oneness and difference at the same time, which are called Gatika Shrutis. So Ramanuja says we have to take the whole Veda, we have to take all the Upanishads. We can't reject any part of them. Normally, Madhva and Shankara, they're trying to reject certain parts or to interpret away certain parts. The Advaitins definitely do not like this verse in the Shruti, which comes from Shvetashvatara Upanishad, 6:13. Nitya Nityanam Chaitanas Chaitananam Bahunam Eko Bahunam Yoga Vidati Kama. Okay, so let's continue on. It cannot be accepted that the soul is one, and the difference is there due to limiting adjuncts, as mentioned in the scriptures. Right. So it's a very complicated thing that Shankara goes through, a very complicated process of trying to explain how the soul can be in ignorance, or how one soul can be in ignorance, or how there can be a separate soul. How can there be? How we can think that there might be? Why are we in the illusion of thinking that there are separate souls? Is basically what Shankara is trying to explain. And he's saying that he basically has to say there's a piece of Brahman which becomes under the influence of Maya or illusion, and that Maya is a superimposition on the soul. The soul is pure like a lake, like a pure body of water, but it's covered by something. Somehow it's covered by something. Or a better example would be the sun. You know, the sun is always pure, right? But sometimes it's a cloudy day. And we look up and the sun is obscured, right? So when the clouds move away, we see the sun again. The sun was never actually obscured. It was we that were obscured. We were the ones that were obscured. So Shankara says we were obscured by the clouds. The sun, otherwise we would realize that the sun is always there. The sun is always pure. So anyway, so the differences remain even in the stage of moksha. It cannot be accepted that the soul is one, and the difference is there due to the limiting adjuncts as mentioned in the scriptures. The differences remain even in the stage of moksha. So this is the Sri Vaishnava understanding, that even in moksha, even in liberation, even in so-called impersonal liberation, there's a difference between the soul and the supersoul. There's a difference between the Jivatman and the Paramatma. There's always a difference. They never become one. Although at that stage, such difference as among deity, God, men, etc., are removed and all the souls are alike. Okay, so there aren't differences like we see in this material world in liberation, in the sense that there's a black man, a white man, a red man, a yellow man, a fat man, a thin man, a woman, a child, an old man, like that. There's not those sort of differences, which depend upon the body, right, or the mind. An intelligent man, a stupid man, like that. There's not those sort of differences, right? These are material differences, which are only differences in the body, because in liberation we're totally dissociated from the body, right? So those things which can change are not there. So we're eternally the same in liberation, and we're eternally the same as others, like that. There are some forms of Vaishnavism, by the way, right, which believe that that the souls are different in liberation. They're fundamentally different. Okay, so the idea of Madhva is that the soul is like a cup. The soul is like a glass, right? Like a cup. Yeah? And the cup is full of water. When the cup has no water in it, it's in ignorance. So when the cup this is the analogy, when the cup's full, it's completely full of knowledge up to a certain extent. But you have a 1 liter cup, another person has a half liter cup. Another person has a small one, a 1/4 liter cup. Right? So what Madhva says is the souls are all different, and he has this theory of taratamya. Taratamya means that the soul, there's a gradation in souls. The gradation in souls is an actual thing, according to Madhva, that although each one of them, you and I, whatever, when we go to moksha, I may be full of knowledge and you may be full of knowledge, but you're a 1 liter cup and I'm a half liter cup. And somebody else is a 1/4 liter cup. So you're full of bliss, or I'm full of bliss, and he's full of bliss. But you're 1 liter full of bliss, I'm a half liter full of bliss, and the other person's a 1/4 liter full of bliss. This is Madhva's idea. Okay, so we don't agree with that. We're against that idea. We don't accept that doctrine, right? We accept that all the souls are full of bliss, unlimited knowledge, right? In moksha. And there are statements. There are statements in the Shruti and the Upanishads that bear this out, right? And it's also logical too. So anyway, just to say that not all Vaishnavas, not all Vaishnava sampradayas think alike, and certainly not all philosophical schools think alike. So we're trying to explain the essence of these three principles according to Vishishtadvaita Vedanta, the philosophy of Ramanuja. It's not just the philosophy of Ramanuja, but of many great saints before Ramanuja, which he quoted from Bodhayana, Tanka, Dramida, Karpardin. These are all ancient commentators that Ramanuja has quoted. Whereas Shankara has basically made up his own thing, and so has Madhva. Right? They've come up with their own forms of philosophy. I'm sure they do quote certain people and things like that, but basically their ideas have evolved much more than what Ramanuja is doing. Ramanuja is simply stating the ancient understanding. Okay, so at this point they're all ancient understandings because they're all at least 700 to 1,000 or more years old. So it cannot be accepted that the soul is one, and the difference is there due to limiting adjuncts. As mentioned in the scriptures, the differences remain in the state of moksha. Right? Now, the differences are not differences between the souls. The difference is the difference between God and the souls. That remains. So in terms of Madhva has a philosophy here called Panchabheda, 5 types of difference. So it means that we have these 3 principles. The 3 principles are the souls, matter, and God, right? So Madhva says, one soul is always different from another soul. So we agree with him. We agree with this. One soul is always different from another soul. He just says that there's difference in the sense of being 1 liter, or half a liter, or quarter liter. No, all the souls are the same, but there's difference between one soul and another soul. Let me give you an example. There's a banyan tree or a mango tree. There's leaves on the tree. One leaf and another leaf are different. They're different because they're 2 different leaves. I can get a leaf from one side of the tree and a leaf from the other side of the tree. Hold it in my hands. There's 2 leaves. This leaf is not identical with this other leaf. It may look like the other leaf, but it's not totally identical. It's not the actual same leaf. It's another leaf. So they look the same. So the souls seem the same. Unlike what Madhva says, Madhva is trying to say, okay, you have a banyan leaf and you have a mango leaf. Yeah, they're different. That's his concept of taratamya, of a 1 liter and a half liter and a quarter liter cup. They're all full. So you have a banyan leaf, you have a mango leaf, you have a banana leaf. These are all different leaves, right? We're not saying that. We're saying on one tree, all the leaves are the same. But yet, those leaves are different from each other in the sense that if I hold them up, I have 2 of them and they're not one. They're not one thing. There's not just 1 leaf on that tree. There's many leaves, but they're all the same. They're all mango leaves, right? Okay, so he has these panchabhedas. So Madhva says, first of all, we have the souls. So between one soul and another soul, there's difference. Yes, there's always a difference between one soul and another soul, you and me, right? Right, so there's a difference between the souls, and there's a difference between the souls and God, right? So there's a difference between each soul, and there's a difference between the souls of God. That's 2 differences. You've got Panchabheda, 5 differences. 3 things, 5 differences. Okay, so there's also a difference between the soul and matter, right? Soul is different from matter. It's spiritual, right? There's a difference also between God and matter, right? God's not just ordinary matter, right? So there's a difference between each soul, difference between God and soul, difference between God and matter, and so we have soul and soul, God and soul, soul and matter, God and matter, right? That's 4, right? And matter and matter. There's a difference between one piece of matter and another piece of matter. They're not exactly the same, right? Even if I take two leaves off a tree, there's a little bit of difference between them, right? So these are the 5 differences according to Madhva. These are called Panchabedas, right? Now, what would be the sixth difference, which he doesn't admit, which Madhva doesn't admit, we also don't admit, right? Right? The difference between one form of God and another form of God. We do not, although we may see Krishna and Rama and Vishnu and Narasimha as different forms, but in essence, they are all the same. In essence, they're all the same. Now, Gaudiya Vaishnavas, they have a concept of Taratamya, like Madhva. They have an essence of they have a concept of Taratamya, or gradation amongst forms of God, and they say Krishna is the highest form, and Vishnu is less than him, and there are certain qualities that Krishna has that Vishnu doesn't have, etc. Like they'll say like that. But this is only in terms of what they call rasa, right? This is described by Gaudiya. This is a bit of an aside here about Gaudiya Vaishnavism. They say in terms of rasa, right? But in terms of tattva, they accept everything is Vishnu tattva. Narasimha, Rama, Krishna, Vishnu, all Vishnu tattva. They're all the same principle. They're all the same. We're talking here about tattva traya, 3 principles. They are the same, God. Krishna's God, Rama's God, Narasimha's God, Vishnu's God. They're all God. Matsya, Kurma, Varaha, they're all God, right? However, what they say is, they say in rasa, in relationship with other persons, they might have a different way of relating to each other. Okay, they have a different way of relating to other people. That's possible. Still, those relationships are all there in each one of them. They're all there. They may not manifest necessarily in the pastimes that we see of Krishna or Rama. For instance, Krishna manifests different relationships with people. Rama manifested a conjugal relationship only with Sita. He had his consort or wife, only one wife, Sita. Krishna had many consorts. He had 16,000 wives. So he manifested that relationship, or that bhava, or that rasa, right, with many consorts, many wives, and gopis, girlfriends. So, okay, so there may be a difference like that in rasa, like that. So that's admitted, that's not denied. However, the potentiality for that rasa is there within each form, within each Vishnu Tattva form. That's what is denied by Gaudiya Vaishnavas. That's what's denied by Gaudiya Vaishnavas. They say that Vishnu is something less in rasa, in the ability to experience that rasa, than Krishna. So that we don't agree with. Okay, so anyway, that's getting a bit off the topic. That's getting more into the Ishvara topic. Here we're talking about the soul. We're not talking about God. Okay, so then the essential nature, although at that stage of moksha, such differences as among deity, God, men are removed, and all souls and the like. Continuing on, the essential nature of all the souls is similar during liberation. Still, the numerical difference persists there, just as the gold pitcher, jewels, corn, etc., which have the same size or weight or form, are distinguishable. Similarly, there's a distinction amongst the souls. Thus, it is justified to accept the souls are different. It is justified to accept the souls are different from each other, even in liberation. They don't all merge into one big soul like that. Okay, all the 3 kinds of souls have the characterizing attribute of being knowers while being dependent on God. The nature of the souls are substances, not unconscious, but conscious, and of the form of bliss. Okay, so before we get to this question, let's go and see in the other version those points. The Lord, who pervades all things that exist, rules and guides them all by being the support, the ground, and the substance, we can say substratum, which is used in the other text, of all existence. But the soul's subservience to the Lord is implied that he should endear himself to the Lord like flowers, sandal paste, or betel leaves, right? So he should endear himself to the Lord just like the Lord's possessions, like sandalwood paste, betel leaves, or flowers, to be used by him and his devotees as they please, unlike the houses, lands, and the son, the wife, estates, household servants, etc., belonging to a person, staying apart from him and capable of being known independently. So we are the property of the Lord, and we are not capable, actually, of being independent from him. Even in this material world, we're not independent. As we saw, we are always acting, and we always need the Lord's permission to act. The soul's subservience to the Lord should be like that of one's body. We experience that our soul uses our body. In the same way, we should experience that God uses us, our soul uses us. Like we use our body, God should be able to use us. Incapable of existing and being known independently. The individual soul at the different levels of unfoldment fall under three categories, namely those in bondage, but is caught up in the terrific involvement in birth and death, those liberated from bondage and residing in the high heavens, meaning Vaikuntha, the land whence there is no returning, the muktas, the liberated souls. This category, who also embraces those released from the bondage of samsara, but who prefer to remain isolated in enjoyment of their selves, kevalas. Okay, so what he's saying is that there's these three broad categories of souls. There's the bound souls, there's the liberated souls, and then there's the ones who are eternally liberated. The ones who are called muktas, there's a subcategory. There's two categories here. There's one category of the ones who enjoy a personalist type of liberation, and those who have a type of impersonalist type of liberation called the kevalas. Kevalya or kevala means to be isolated. So they're somewhat isolated. They're not completely isolated because you can never be completely isolated from God. And number three, the ever-free nityas or celestials, nityasuris like Adishesha, Garuda, Vishvaksena, which we discussed, who are the original servants of the Lord in Vaikuntha, who never pass through this grueling mill of samsara with its involvement in the cycle of birth and death. Now, the soul, with its inherent qualities of bliss and intelligence, right, got entangled in the bondage of samsara, engulfed by ignorance, avidya, the fruits of actions, good and bad karma, impressed tendency or vasana, right? We discussed this vasana, also means desire, right? And predilections, ruchi means tastes, right? Different tastes, owing to its contact with non-sentient matter. We discussed this in the other text. The seat of the three gunas or tamas. So Prakriti has tamas. Prakriti or material nature, including the material body, is affected by these different modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance. This is similar to water, which is kept cool by itself, which acquires heat and sound when it's put into a vessel and kept on fire. So if you take a pot and you put it on to boil, it not only gets hot, it also starts to make this boiling sound. Right. The superimposed ignorance, etc., will therefore clear off when the soul is disassociated with non-sentient matter and its components. Again, we talked about this in the other version, about the Jivan Mukti and Videha Mukti, how we don't accept Jivan Mukti because of this point here, this doctrine here, that liberation only occurs when we are completely devoid, when the soul is completely separated from and kept apart from the gross material body, Sthula Sharira, and the subtle body, the Sukshma Sharira. Right. So innumerable are the souls in each of these three categories. And we discussed all the arguments about how the Advaitins say that there's only one soul, and how we say no, there are innumerable. There are innumerable souls in all these categories referred to above. But then some Advaitins, not just some, the Advaitins, all Advaitins say that there is no distinction amongst souls, and actually there is only one soul. If this be correct, when one person enjoys pleasure, another should not feel pain. It is, however, seen that when some enjoy pleasures, others are afflicted with pain and suffering. The distinction between the souls has therefore to be admitted. The argument that the varying experiences are incidental to the assumption of different bodies by the same soul will not also hold water, seeing that, say, Shabari, who assumed 50 bodies all at once and married 50 princesses, did not have such alternating experiences simultaneously. Despite his ubiquitous appearance in different bodies, because there's only one soul pervading with consciousness all those 50 bodies. There's only one knower. We discussed this, that the knower is the one that feels the pain and pleasure, the soul, right? And so a change in body doesn't mean a change in soul, right? A change in soul would mean if there are different pains and pleasures, there's different souls. It doesn't mean, it's not because of having different bodies that somebody would have pain and pleasure. He can only feel, even though he has 50 bodies and he's expanded his consciousness into 50 bodies, he can only feel in one way. He can't feel 50 different ways. If there is no distinction between souls and one and the same soul is manifest in different bodies, one should not be bogged down in the throes of samsara while others attain salvation, right? I pointed that out in the other, when we discussed this in the other version, in the other edition, right? That when we go to an Advaitin and he says, everybody says, oh, this person's a Jivan Mukta. He's an liberated person, even in this body. Well, you go to him and say, well, if your philosophy is that everything is one, so if you're liberated, that means I must also be liberated. And here, the other example given is that one cannot be a teacher imparting instructions and another a disciple receiving instructions, so forth, and so on and so forth, pitted as diametrically opposed situations. So you can't have teachers and students either, right? You couldn't have one person as a teacher who knows the subject and who's teaching something, and another person who's a student who's learning the subject. Because the student would go to the teacher, and if he's an Advaita teacher, and say, I must know what you know. I don't need to learn from you. I don't need a guru because I already know. I am the guru, right? There will be no, because I explained before, knowledge means there has to be a knower, there has to be knowledge, and there has to be something to be known. So in the Bhagavad Gita, even it says you approach somebody who knows something to learn something from them and ask questions from them. Why do you have to ask questions from people if you already know? If you already know, then don't ask questions. There's no need to ask questions at all. So just sit there. I'm the guru. I'm the teacher. I already know. So that is obviously incorrect, and that's why we can't accept Advaita Vedanta. That's one of the reasons. Okay, so nor could it be such a vast range of unequal creations, a motley crowd of devas, men, beasts, etc., some molded in felicity and others hurled into misery. So you couldn't have all this different distinction that we have in this material world in liberation. Further, the concept of a single soul, that is oneness of the soul, comes in conflict with the scriptures that declare the multiplicity of souls, right? Svetashvatara Upanishad 6.13 says that the Lord, who is the eternal amongst the eternals, the intelligent amongst the intelligent, singly fulfills the desires of the many, right? And that is that's the very famous quotation, which I ask you all to learn. Nityo nityo nam, chetanas chetana nam, bahu eko bahunam yo vididati kaman. From Svetashvatara Upanishad. What does it mean again? The Lord, who is the eternal amongst eternals, nityo nityo nam, nityo nitya nam, right? The intelligent amongst the intelligence, chetanam chetana nam, right? It can also be said the soul amongst souls, right? Like that, chetanam chetana nam. Chetana means the conscious, the conscious amongst conscious, amongst consciousness, amongst many consciousness, the one consciousness amongst many consciousness, right? Then eko, he, one, bahunam, the many, yovididati kaman, singly he fulfills the desires of the many. If there is no many, if there's no reality to the many, right, then why here in the Upanishads do we have a mention of the many? There are a lot of other places in the Upanishads that mention many also in terms of souls. So therefore, we can't accept the Advaita Vedanta's idea that there's only one soul. It would not be correct to hold that the scriptures refer only to the differences due to the limiting adjuncts, right? Inasmuch as the differences persist even on the yonder side of heaven, in other words, in the state of salvation in Vaikuntha, right? And he has also quoted exactly the same thing that I quoted right before, Rig Veda 122.20, Tad Vishnu Paramam Param Sada Pasenti Suryaha Divi Vichaksalatadam Tad Viprasa Pandivo Jagravadam Sasamendite Vishnuya Paramam Param. Sada Pashyanti Suryaha. The Suryaha, those persons who are liberated in Vaikuntha, right? The Suryaha, the Suras, as opposed to the Asuras. Asuras means demons. I guess we're all demons here in this material world, but those who are there are Suras. We are Asuras, right? So Suras, the persons who are the Muktas and the Nityas who are serving God, they are Pashyanti, they see God, Pashyanti. The word Pash comes from the verb drish actually, but it turns into Pash in the base form and is added anti. For those of you who know a little Sanskrit, it's the present continuous tense. It's a continuous thing that happens. It's a continuous act. The people in Vaikuntha, the Suris, the Surayaha, which is the word Suri is an I-ending noun, right? It's Ikaranta Pumlinga Suri Shabda. And it goes Shuri, Shurayaha. Surayaha is the plural or Bahavachanam, right? And it means those multitude of souls that are liberated in Sri Vaikuntha. Pasyanti, continuously see, right? Pasyanti, they see. And the word sada, the word sada means forever, always. Means always, right? They always see. They're always seeing the Supreme Lord, right? So there would be no Pashyanti. It would be Pasyami. I see, if it was one soul, right? But it's not. It's Pashyanti. It's they see more than one, more than two even, because in Sanskrit we have dual also. This is plural, Bahuvachanam. So this is another proof right in the Veda, right in Rig Veda 122.20, most famous verse, right? The word delineated being in plural number, right? The one here, right? Surayaha in Bahuvachanam, plural, and also Pashyanti also is plural. So he says this one, which is put in italics, Suryaha is plural. But I would say not only is this plural, but Pashyanti is also plural, right? They see. Who sees? The Suryaha, the Suris, right? The devotees in heaven, in Vaikuntha. No doubt, so far as the liberated souls are concerned, differences such as those obtaining on the other side of heaven, namely humans, devas, etc., do not exist. So in Vaikuntha, we don't have those differences that we have here of black, white, thin, fat, male, female, etc., like that. Nor are they differentiated by passions like lust or anger or greed or illusion or whatever, because these things are all parts of the modes of material nature which are attached to the body. They're also parts of the body. So despite this kind of parity in their essential nature, their multiplicity is a pronounced fact. There's still not one soul. There's still many, but they are all knowledgeable, all blissful in Vaikuntha. In the same way that there are several gold pots, gems, grains of rice, etc., of the same weight, of the same quality, weight, and size. Okay. So the multiplicity of, he's just giving examples here. The multiplicity of the individual souls is therefore established both by reasoning and the authority of the scripture. So these are different ways of establishing information. We cannot establish information about what's going on in Vaikuntha or what's going on in liberation by sense perception, because we cannot perceive with our senses what's going on in Vaikuntha. We can't get out a telescope and look up and see Vaikuntha and see what's going on there, right? However, there are two other ways of knowing knowledge that we accept, knowing right knowledge, not just sense perception, which is called pratyaksha, but also anumana and shabda. So both by anumana, which is reasoning, logical reasoning, and by the authority of the scriptures, which is shabda, right, authoritative statement, we understand what goes on in the spiritual world. So it will be seen from the essential nature of the individual set out in the aphorism 4, which we could go and check out, but we're not going to go, that there are some features which differentiate the individual soul from matter and certain others which differentiate the soul from the Lord. And I mentioned before that Madhva has this idea of this doctrine of Panchavedas, which we also accept, right? There are these three tattvas. Here we have a book, Tattva Trayam. There are three principles: souls, matter, and God, like that. They have 5 differences. There's a difference between each different piece of matter. There's a difference. So matter and matter, there's a difference. There's a difference between soul and soul. Each soul is different, like that. There's a difference between soul and matter. That's 3 differences, right? There's a difference between God and matter. That's 4 differences. There's a difference between God and the soul. That's five differences. But there is not a difference between one form of God and another form of God. Essentially, all forms of God are the same principle. And we discussed this also, how the Gaudiyas have this taratamya. They have a gradation of rasa amongst different forms that they believe in. But we don't believe in that. We believe that essentially God is God, whether he be seen in the form of Narasimha, Rama, Krishna, Narayana, Vishnu, whatever it is, Matsyakoma, Varaha, like that. They're all Vishnu Tattva. The principle is the same, right? The principle is the same. So now there is also a common feature, certain features that are in common, right? The individual and soul, the individual soul and matter, and the entities, and to the individual soul and the Lord. So a common characteristic of all the 3 entities is that they are eternal, right? So all these 3 principles have something in common. What do they have in common? They're all eternal. They're all considered eternal, even though the Shastra says in the beginning there was one and the one became many, right? That's stated in the Veda. So even though it says that, we cannot trace out a time before time when that happened, right? So although we say that God is the cause of the material nature and also the cause of the souls, we cannot find out a time or we can't conceive of a time beyond time, because time didn't exist, when there was only God and there was nothing else. Okay, so although we admit that God is the cause of everything, right? Still, we have to accept that the souls are eternal, the world is eternal, and God is eternal. So we accept that. So this is also mentioned in the Veda. So as common characteristics of all the 3 entities are that they are all eternal. So that's a common characteristic between the 3 principles. Being controlled and supported by the Lord and being dependent upon him are also common to the individual soul and matter, right? So matter is dependent on the Lord. The soul is also dependent on the Lord. In fact, in some other books of Piralokacharya, he's talked about the soul being just like an inanimate object that belongs to the Lord. So we should feel ourselves completely dependent and supported and controlled by the Lord, because we are, right? That's the truth. And when we feel like that, that is actually property. That is our surrender. That is our actual surrender. When we feel like a piece of property, the Lord's property, or we can say a slave also, right? Like that, or a servant, like that. But when we say slave or servant, there's a possibility for the slave to go free or the servant to have a day off and to not serve the master, right? But whereas there is no possibility for the piece of property to not belong to the person, even if I lose my cell phone, it's still my cell phone, right? It's still mine, right? I can't emancipate my cell phone and make it free, like it's mine, right? So similarly, the soul belongs to God in that way, in that very essential way that a piece of property belongs to somebody. So once again here, God is independent. He's swatantra. He's completely independent. Whereas everybody else, even unfortunately up to the point of Mahalakshmi, right, which will the Wadagais, the Northern School of Sri Vaishnavism, they won't accept. They'll say, no, Lakshmi is also independent. No. Everything is independent. Everything is dependent on the Lord. The Lord is the only one who's completely independent. Everybody's dependent on him. Everybody else, even Mahalakshmi. So all the souls, all the matter in the universe, everything else is dependent upon him. So that is why the Southern School of Tengalaya Acharyas, they placed Mahalakshmi in the same category as the individual soul. She's sentient, so she has that in. She's not dull matter, right? If we have Tattva Trayam, right, we accept that there are these three Vedantic reals, these three principles. So that means everything we see, everything we talk about, we can categorize as being one part. So my glass of water is Prakriti. It is matter, right? My book, that's matter, right? My body, that's matter, like that, right? My soul isn't matter. My mind is a type of subtle matter. That's Sukshma Sharira. That's also matter. My soul is not matter. God is not matter, right? Mahalakshmi is not matter. She's also sentient like us, but the difference is, and Madhva also has a book called Tattva Sankhya. Tattva, we have this book Tattva Traya, where there are three tattvas which are explained. Madhva has a book where he describes all the different tattvas that he accepts, and he explains how they evolve like that. So his first definition of tattvas is he says that there are two tattvas, two basic tattvas, right? Two basic tattvas, right? We have three tattvas. He has two tattvas to start with. What are his two tattvas? He says, we also agree with him in a sense, right? So he says there's independent and dependent. God is independent, is swatantra. And we and the universe and everything else is dependent on God. So we are paratantra. We are completely dependent on God. So in that sense, we have this individual soul and matter have something in common. That is completely supported, controlled, and dependent on God. The Tengalai Sri Vaishnavacharyas will say, well, what about Lakshmi? Lakshmi is also controlled, supported, and dependent on God. Is she not? Therefore, but she's not dull matter. She's not insentient. She's sentient. Therefore, we have to place her, if we're to pick, you have three doors. It's like a contest. You have three doors. You have to pick. You have to pick Chit, Achit, or Ishvara. Right? So, myself, my soul, which is it? Are we Ishvara? Are we God? Are we matter? Or are we the soul? We're the soul. We're the soul. Right? That's easy. Right? Everybody agrees on that. Right? Except the Advaitins, they pick door number 3. We're God. They pick we're God. The soul is God. Okay. So the Vaishnavas, we all accept the soul is the soul. Right? We all accept God is God. We pick the God door for God. Right? What category do we pick for Mahalakshmi? What category do you pick for Mahalakshmi? Now, they say, the Vadagalais say, that she has certain attributes like the Lord more than the souls. So therefore, we'll pick door number 3. We'll put her in the category of God. But we say no, just as it's said here that the soul and matter are both dependent upon the Lord. Similarly, Mahalakshmi also is completely dependent, controlled, and supported by the Lord. Therefore, we have to accept her as we have to pick door number 1, Chit. That she is, and therefore we place it. Now, we don't say that he's the same as you and me. She's great, like that. Madhva also says that she's great, right? But she's an individual soul, like that. He says that she is great, but she is also dependent upon the Lord. She's Paratantra, like that. The difference is that what Madhva says, that amongst those who are dependent, amongst those conscious beings that are dependent on the Lord. So his second thing is he'll say, okay, there's that which is independent and that which is dependent. The Lord is independent. Matter and the souls are dependent. Amongst matter and souls, only the souls only the sentience, right, of the souls are sentient, right? So amongst the sentients, we have those who have seen sorrow and those who have never seen sorrow. He picks Lakshmi as being the soul who has never seen sorrow. He says all other souls have seen sorrow. So he doesn't accept that there are these nityas like Garuda and Vishvaksena and Ananta who are nityasuris. Okay? So that's the difference between Madhva and Ramanuja on that point, like that. So in any case, it is a matter of emphasis on the aspect of the Mahalakshmi has some. She's great, definitely greater than all. We can think of it like a family. Okay, there's a father and mother and children. We're like the children, and as Ramanuja says, Asmat Madaram Jagad Mataram. She is like our mother. So she's an adult. She's definitely in a position of leadership, but she's not like the ordinary children. But she still is dependent upon the Lord. She's still dependent upon the husband. She's still controlled and supported and dependent upon him. So anyway, that's just a bit of an aside here. Here, the point Vilalabhacharya is trying to make is that the soul and matter have something in common. Somebody might think, well, soul and matter don't have anything in common. Yes, they do. They're dependent on God. They're both dependent on God. They're completely controlled, supported, and dependent upon him. So bliss intelligence being unmanifest to the senses, non-comprehensibility, non-changeability are all properties common to the Lord and the individual self. Right? So we have some things we have some things which we have in common, right? The dull matter does not experience intelligence, bliss, incomprehensibility, non-changeability, right? It changes, right? So these are all common aspects between the Lord and the soul. The unique attribute of the individual soul that stamps it out exclusively from the other two entities, however, is knowledge. The unique attribute of the individual soul that stamps it out exclusively from the other two entities is that its knowledge harnessed to the dependence, sheshatva, of the Lord. Its knowledge is a knowledge of dependence, whereas the knowledge of the Lord is not dependent on anything. Knowledge is common to both the soul and God, while dependence on the Lord is common to both the soul and matter. So it is only dependence-based or dependence-oriented knowledge that is the characteristic attribute of the soul, right? So Mahalakshmi also has this dependence-style knowledge, whereas God does not have dependence-style knowledge. He never thinks of himself as subservient. In Leela, maybe. Maybe in Leela, Krishna or Rama thinks of themselves as a servant of Sita or Radha or whatever it is like that. This is a Leela. This is not, we're not talking about Leela here. We're talking about Tattva. We're talking in principle, right? The prince, in truth, in liberation, in principle, free from any Leela or free from any Maya or yoga, even yoga Maya, any sort of illusion or play in this material world, right? God never becomes not God. He's always God. He can't change that. He doesn't become dependent in the sense of having this dependence knowledge, thinking that he belongs to someone else, or he is dependent or controlled or supported by something else. He isn't. He is the supreme support, the supreme controller, and the supreme person to be dependent upon, not to be dependent on anybody else. He's independent. So it is only dependence-based and dependence-oriented knowledge that is the characteristic attribute of the soul. So he's going to give this in a summary form here. So I think we'll leave it here today. We did quite a lot, and we've talked a lot about the soul. We're going to get through probably the rest of the piece about the soul. I find that Satyamurti Iyengar's version is a much better because he's definitely going into the commentary of Manavala Mahamuni, whereas the other version, the other edition by these two scholars in Delhi, they don't seem to be going very deeply into Manavala Mahamuni's commentary. And it may be because they're Sanskrit scholars and they're looking at the Sanskrit slokas, the Sanskrit sutras here, because they seem to be in Sanskrit, not in Manipavala, which is a mixture of Sanskrit and Tamil. Whereas the commentary by Manavala Mamuni is most probably in Manipavala, and maybe they didn't read it, even though they, from their introduction and their preface and everything, they seem to refer to it, but they don't seem to have gone into it in depth. As I said, this text, we need to look at that third edition in English and go through the really old English, but we don't have time for that. It's very, very convoluted. So we're doing as best as we can with the two readable versions that we have, but of the two, I'm becoming much more impressed by Satyamurti Iyengar's version. Okay. So, any questions or comments on today? We talked about the soul and everything.
Swami, namaskaram. Just wanted to ask, with respect to, as the soul is totally, utterly dependent on the Lord, as we understand, totally, that's the position of the soul. And you were mentioning sometime in the past that you mentioned the different examples about self-initiated property and those which were successful and those which wasn't. Like, for instance, the example of Bharata was self-initiated. But then you also mentioned that even Gajendra and Draupadi and Vibhishana was self-initiated, but those ones were successful. But Bharat wasn't successful, which I know is a little bit controversial between the two schools. But the thing is it that, as you said, the soul, the Lord actually, he's the one that makes the soul surrender. So is it that
there's no such thing really as self-initiation, is what the point is, right? So today when you weren't here, we were describing about the five aspects of action according to the Bhagavad Gita. So the Lord is always one of those five. So although we think that we are the ones who are initiating action in this world, it's actually the Lord who's allowing us to initiate that action. So, it's a fine line, but who is the one who puts who is the one who put in the mind or in the soul, let's say, of Draupadi, Gajendra, and Vibhishana to surrender to God?
Yeah,
who is the one who put in the mind of Bharata to surrender to Rama?
Yeah. So in other words, then, is it that the Lord just chooses souls out of his causeless mercy whenever, and he makes them surrender whenever he sees fit, and that's how the whole system of property works? That's why
I'll give you an example. It's like a play. This world is like a play, right? So when you have a play, you have actors, right? And the actors act, and they have their lines, and they have their dialogue, they have their costumes, they have their makeup, they have an audience, but you also have a director of the play. You have a play director. The director is allowing for the actors to do their parts, right? He can step in at any time. It's like being in rehearsal of the play. Imagine that the audience isn't there. Imagine that you're in a dress rehearsal. So you're all dressed up. You have this material body, this Stula and Shukshma Sharira. You're here in this material world. You're playing your part like that. You don't know who you are. Somebody, they don't know who you are. They think that they're this body. They think they're this part of this world. Then there's other people who know a little bit. They have a little bit of an inkling that they think that I'm a servant of God or anything like that. So they act in this world. So once they know that, so they try, so that the director can direct them to do it. He'll say, no, wait, stop, right? Or even a director in a film like that. The action will be going on, and the director will say, stop. And he will say, we have to do this scene again. This time I want you to do this. I want you to do like that. I want you to do like that. So God is there. He's the other bird in the tree in the Upanishadic, analogy, right? The super soul is always there guiding us. And so we may think that we're surrendering to the Lord, but actually he's the one who gives us the impetus to surrender. But what is surrender? Surrender is simply the knowledge that we are the Lord's property, like that. So we are already surrendered, actually, right? Just like the actor is already The actor knows who he is. He's not the Prince of Denmark in Hamlet. He's not. That's the part he plays, right? If I see the actor on the street and I say, Hamlet, if I say how doth thee, how you go like that, he's going to think I'm crazy. No, that's my character. I don't play that. I'm now free. I'm in moksha. I'm in liberation. I've left the theater, right? I understand that is just a part that I play. But when I'm on stage, right, in the dress rehearsal, the director tells me what to do, and I cannot move without the director. Or like in a film, he tells me how to do it, like that. All right. If I'm looking direction, I appeal to the director. Even when you're in a real play, sometimes you forget your lines and you call to the side of the stage. What's the line? Give me the line. I forgot what the line was. Like that. To say in the dialogue, like that. So that is what Lord Rama is doing. He's saying to us. He's saying to those persons who say, "I am yours," I will make them free, like that. He's prompting us. He's a director of the play, prompting us with the line. We should know that line. We should know that we're the property of the Lord, and we should say, "I'm yours, Lord." But we don't know. We've forgotten our line. So he says, those who say, "I am yours," I will protect them, like that. So he's like the director. He's a director. So similarly, he's the director. He's not just another bird in the tree, right? He is the well-wisher. He's the friend. He says that. Suhridam Sarvabhuta. What does he say? Bhagavad Gita. Bhokturam yagitapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram suhridam sarvabhutanam gyatvanam shanti michati. You will only get peace. What does peace mean? Peace means liberation. Ultimately, peace. Freedom from material things. You will only achieve that if you understand that God is Bhoktaram, the supreme enjoyer. Who is he supposed to enjoy? What's he supposed to enjoy? Us. We're his property. Bhoktaram yagitapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram. He owns everything, including not just material nature, all planets and demigods. Right? Us. He owns us. Right? Bhoktaram yagitapasam. He's the only enjoyer. He owns everything, including us. But at the same time, he's our friend and well-wisher. We're dependent upon him, but he's our well-wisher. So when we forget a line, he prompts us with the line. He's the director, and he says, if you just simply say this, the play will be successful. He wants the play to be successful. The successful end of the play is the last act, right? Everybody takes a bow and walks off stage, and they're liberated, right? But unless that happens, unless the play is done to its conclusion, it will go on and on and on and on and on. And that's what's happening in this material world. So he impels us to at certain points to get to the end of the play. The director wants to get to the finish. He wants to get a correct take right before he will print the film, like that, to make the film. He also wants, in directing the play, he wants everybody to know their lines perfectly. So he reminds you of your line. He tells you of your line if you forget it, like that, and he helps you. The Lord wants us to surrender to him. He wants to take any excuse to say that's a good job. So just like a director or a player, okay, what you did was okay. We need more practice. We need more rehearsals. So when God says to you, we need more rehearsals, it means another lifetime, another lifetime, another lifetime. But he's prompting you. He's continuing to prompt you. And so we can't do any action without the director. We can't do any action. Actors are powerless without the director of a movie or a play. They're powerless. They can do as much as that, but without that, he provides everything for them. He provides the costume. He provides the script. He provides the He provides the makeup. He provides everything for them, like that. And when they forget the line, he prompts them, like Lord Rama does in the Ramacharana Sloka. So this analogy of being this is why this material world is called Leela Vibhuti, the place of the play. This is the playhouse. This is Stratford-on-Avon, or whatever. This is Shakespeare's thing, right? We have to understand that God is the director. He's directing us. He's directing the wanderings of all the living beings, like that. And he will direct us back to home, back to Vaikuntha, or to the spiritual world. He will direct us, but we have to agree with that. Yeah, so you agree that the Satyamurti Anga is a better version. Yeah. I also agree with that. And therefore I'm going to put more emphasis on it as we go through, if we continue going through. So does that make sense?
Yes,
so
that's what I was trying to say. So then the ultimate idea basically is that everyone in this universe will eventually attain moksha, because he will do it. Ultimately, he will save all of the souls eventually. It's just whenever he's ready out of his causeless mercy.
Yeah. It's not, well, when he's ready, he's working on it. It's a work in progress. Like the director is working on, that's why we have dress rehearsals. The director wants to get people together, and first of all, there's what we call a table reading. Everybody sits and they read their lines, and they're just sitting there without costumes, without makeup and everything. And they're not even on stage. They're just sitting, saying their lines to each other, getting a feel for the script. Right. So yeah, so they're not able to fully do the play. God enjoys the play. He wants the play to go on. Right. But table reading is only the beginning. That's maybe the other lifetimes that we have to have before we get to the point of human life. And then when we come to human life, it's a dress rehearsal, and
you say that he's always, as you said, he's working on it. So he's always sending his devotees or coming himself to keep on prompting us to get that realization. Basically, he's basically, that's the way he's working in it, and he's sending devotees and everywhere to give this knowledge about him, to kind of like reawaken that realization that we are his property. Would you say that?
Yeah, this is his enjoyment. He enjoys doing this. He enjoys the different, doing all these different ways. He's constantly doing it in different ways. What do they say? Variety is the spice of life. Prabhupada used to say, variety is the mother of enjoyment. Right? If I go to the ice cream shop every day and I have vanilla, I don't really feel like I'm taking the most advantage of it. If I go and I'll try this flavor, I'll try that flavor. So he's constantly doing all these different things. He's giving Namalwar, apparently he's just giving Namalwar liberation. Even Namalwar's not even asking for it. And other people, he's giving them liberation after they ask for it. Other people, he's prompting them. Vibhishana, or he's saying that you should say like this and then you'll be liberated, or you should do like this. He's coming in, he's in different avatars in different situations, and dealing with demons and devotees and different things. The whole Jaya Vijaya thing with Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha, and he's going through all these different scenarios, right? Does a director only direct one play and then retire? No, he doesn't. Does a director only make one movie and then retire? No. He's constantly coming up with ideas of how to make films and plays. Constantly he's coming up with them. And those ones which are really famous, are there in the scriptures. We have Vibhishana Sharanagati, we have Draupadi Sharanagati, we have Gajendra Moksha. These things become famous, right, for us to remember. We have the Ramayana, the Mahabharata. We have all these different leelas that the Lord in his different avatars have taken, like that. These are to inspire us and for us to remember. So, just like actors, we've read all these different plays of Shakespeare. We've read all these different plays of these different famous playwrights, like that. We've read all these different scripts of different authors, like that. So we're accustomed to this sort of thing, like that. And we have our favorites too. We have our favorite way of playing. Sometimes we play the villain. Sometimes we play the hero. Sometimes we play the heroine. Sometimes we play some other role, like that. But the ultimate ending of all of these is a successful play or a successful film, and the actor then is freed from his role as actor and regains his normal life. What is his normal life? His normal life is that in Vaikuntha, the soul in Vaikuntha with Sriman Narayana. So yeah, there's so much variety. There's so much variety, and we can't question why isn't it stereotyped? Why isn't it the same for everybody? Why isn't it the same all throughout time and space? And it's because the Lord has got ananta kalyana gunas. He has got infinite auspicious qualities, and therefore he wants to use them all. Why not? Why would a person with so many unlimited qualities and attributes not show them? He likes to. He enjoys it.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Swami. Namaskaram.
Namaskaram.